this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader, reading books for you. Today, I will be reading Chapter 7, New Beginnings, from Tested Love by Liv Donata. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the author for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I've included links for me to find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. New Beginnings. It was Saturday. Robert and Sadie had woken up in each other's arms as Robert's 10 a.m. alarm rang loudly, echoing throughout the house. Sadie walked to the bathroom to brush her teeth as Robert patted down his face with shaving cream. They were getting ready for their first day as husband and wife. He was clean-shaven and Sadie was freshly dressed in a nice summer dress. Robert's staff had prepared a special breakfast for the pair on the patio. As they walked to the stained glass patio doors, Sadie grabbed the papers from the Rematch Center from her bags. She was nervous, but she knew the worst case scenario was that he wouldn't believe her. As they sat on the porch, Sadie soaked in the sun rays of a beautiful day. The breakfast table was decorated with various scones and jam as well as raspberry ginseng tea. Sadie gently placed the sheet of paper on the knit tablecloth. Roberts looked puzzled as he raised his glasses to his eyes. "What does this mean?" he asked. Sadie placed her teacup back down onto the place setting. "It means they've been tracking us, and the test isn't real. They're trying to control us." "So we were paired together for no reason?" Robert asked rhetorically. "Well, I believe fate brought us together, of course, but the test didn't match us together for the greater good," Sadie muttered as she warmed up to Robert. Robert looked stunned as he asked, "Who else knows?" Sadie didn't know how to answer. She didn't know if others had found out only to be killed by Bayan's forces. Were he and Sadie at risk? "I'm not sure," she replied, "but we have to do something." Robert nodded in agreement as they both finished up their meal. Now was the time to make a plan. Robert knew some people in public office that he could get on his side. They could help Robert and Sadie maybe put together a press conference or introduce a legislative proposal. It wasn't so much the actions they would have to take that scared Sadie, but it was the inevitable reactions to them. Not only did the federal government have an incentive to keep the law in place so as not to expose themselves and lose control, but the law had become a type of community culture. There would be people that wanted to keep the tradition even though it was baseless. It felt like it would be Robert and Sadie against the world, against an institution. Robert went into his office to make some call and to get the ball rolling. Sadie, who had finally begun to feel relieved, decided to give herself a tour around the Hodges estate. It was as if Robert had taken her under his wing, and she had finally started thriving. The estate was large enough to spend a week discovering. The 12,000 square foot estate had been passed down from generation to generation. The main house foyer was decked out with portraits of all of his ancestors. Sadie had no doubt that she and Robert would share a spot there one day. As she walked throughout the front of the house, she found herself in the library. It had been years since she had the leisure to sit down and read one of the classics. This was one of the largest collections of books she had ever seen. It was beyond the small community libraries she had visited as a kid, with only 400 or 500 books. This library had to have at least a few thousand copies, from Edgar Allan Poe to William Faulkner, and his numerous novels. Sadie had loved reading The Sound and the Fury growing up. It taught Sadie her first lessons of pride and passion. Now, though, the book reminded her of Clark, whose pride had also been his downfall. She hoped his family was healing well. She sat down at the table and began to read something new, slowly drifting off. Sadie woke up to a kiss on her cheek. Robert caressed her shoulder as she sat up in her chair. He broke the silence and said, "My love, I've had a very productive day." "Oh, you have?" Sadie asked. Robert sat next to Sadie and adjusted his arm around her as he spoke. The governor's assistant arranged a meeting with him and the mayor. He's been briefed on the subject matter and believes he can help us cross the yellow tape. We just need to make sure we make as many copies of that result page as possible. We can call into radio shows and advertise the truth, posting the copies anywhere and everyone. We'll need to keep the original in a safe place, but the rest will be given to anyone in public office that agrees to help. Listen, Sadie, this is deep. He brought them both to their feet. The governor believes this has to have been happening for years now, if not from the beginning. Someone at the top wants to keep it this way for some reason. There may be people out to get us. For all we know, this is the first bit of proof out there. I've hired security to be with us during any public appearances. Robert was frantic, yet his concerns calmed Sadie. She wasn't alone in her worry. They could share the load. Robert began to pace around the library as Sadie admired him. As Robert turned around the room again, Sadie grabbed his swinging hand, pulling him into a warm embrace. They couldn't let go of each other. Sadie stood up on her tiptoes and whispered warmly into his ear, "Thank you for protecting me." Robert took her chin in his hand and went in for a kiss. It was electric. Sadie felt empowered, safe, loved, and connected to Robert like never before. These were feelings she had never felt for anyone. They almost scared her. She was a character in her own story who had been falling forward for years, then finally able to fly. This was her moment. For once in her life of ups and downs, she felt the world balancing again. It was right. Robert led Sadie away to the bedroom and shut the door behind them. That night, they made love. Stay tuned for the next chapter, Healing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book.